Okay, and is everyone hear me now? Looks like my mic might have been muted. Thanks for your patience while I get all the tech issues out here. Okay, I believe that should be better. Are we ready to get started? Okay. How is this? I got a message that the mic wasn't working before, so I just wanted to find out. I changed the settings. Is this working better for you guys? Are you able to hear me? Oh, okay. I'm gonna go ahead and start the reading because I see that some people said that my mic seems to be working better now. And this is Chapter 18, Minerals versus Fauna. Twilight settled upon the cobblestone castle as the sun disappeared over the jagged pinnacles of Mount Reykjavik. The soft tinkling chanting of the Apissimo welcomed the coming night. The tiny glowing creatures fluttered at the edge of the forest. Commander Luke paced the battlements as the cold autumn evening turned to night. The reconstruction of the east wall was ahead of schedule, but somehow Luke knew it was still not going along fast enough. The madmen had lost control of the metal men once again. Their ranks were already worn thin. Luke couldn't ask the king to send more builders to complete the wall faster, or more soldiers to keep the madmen from causing further damage. Who was the greater threat? The Animalians or the madmen with their crazy inventions? The creation of a superior weapon is an admirable pursuit, but more often than not, the superior weapons turned on their creators and the Mineralite soldiers. The bronze gondola of the airship Kensington loomed over him and shone in the dying light. The engine car released a high-pitched whistle as it cycled into top gear and startled the Apissimo into silence. The Kensington's floodlights switched on and painted the grounds outside the castle with pure white light. As Luke's eyes adjusted to the bright lights, strange swirling formed into silhouettes. No, it can't be. Those silhouettes coalesced into figures with strange masks, some with the beak of a hawk, others with the ears of a cat or the snout of a fox. Animalians? How did they get out here? We're in the middle of Mineralite Kingdom. The simple silence jarred, roaring in Commander Luke's ears. He locked eyes with the cat-masked leader. The Silverus wore a blue mask and stood in front of his soldiers. Neither moved, neither spoke. Both waited for the other army to make the first move. And I'll be damned if I let an Animalian get the best of me. Every man to his battle stations. The Animalians are here. The klaxon blared, and Luke shoved the shell-shocked lieutenant standing beside him out of his way. Get the builders inside now. The men rushed to obey, the fear of death nipping at their heels. Get the scouts in the sky. I want an overview of what we're up against yesterday. The commander watched as gravity defiers floated into the air. You, he grabbed a messenger by the collar. Tell the Kensington to ready the armaments. The pop of compressed air and the sound of bullets hitting their mark joined the chaotic symphony. Captain Pascal is one step ahead of me as usual. A report came back from the scout. The Animalians have found the hole in the east wall and are fighting their way into the courtyard. Luke's heart sank, but he hardened his face. Activate the metal men. But sir, you can't seriously consider that a viable option. Remember what happened last time. What are you suggesting? It was a hopeless gesture, but they didn't have another choice. They would die alongside the animals if they had to. Nothing, sir, the rookie piped back as his spine snapped to attention, and he saluted the commander. Good, because if you were suggesting we surrender, I would have fedged to the Animalians myself. Luke looked out among his pale, terror-stricken army. And that goes for the lot of you. Open the gates and get out into the battlefield. When the Gravity Defier scouts faced off against the winged Animalian men, it was not a pretty sight to see. The Animalians carved the soldiers to pieces or succumbed to the continuous pelt of Mineralite arrows. You had to keep your head about you to prevent yourself being crushed underneath the falling body of an Animalian or Mineralite soldier. The men with the strength pendants kicked the Animalians down while still protecting themselves from the metal claws and swords of their enemies. The indestructible men took out the Animalians by sheer force, oblivious to their weapons. The men with heightened senses worked the muskets on the battlements and picked off the Animalians one at a time. Those with superior reflexes and agility fought hand-to-hand against the few Animalians who made it through the hole in the wall. Where are my machines? Luke shouted at the 4 men who were stirring up the metal men. These 4 metal men were the difference between life and death for the Mineralites. The water in their tanks is boiling, sir, one of the soldiers picked up. We'll be pressurized in no time. But, he shared a startled glance with his fellow soldiers. What? The last thing he needed was one of them to break rank. Even with the modifications, there's no guarantee they won't go mad again. There's no way to stop them. We'll just have to wait till they run out of steam again. We could use a little madness right now, wouldn't you agree? If the Animalians wanted to fight, he'd give them a fight. He would give them all their lives if it meant vanquishing the enemy. Each of the machines emitted a noise somewhere between a squeal and a groan in rapid succession. The 4 soldiers stepped into their control towers, 3 cables running from the towers to the machines. The 3 metal warriors marched out of the fort. It was not quiet, and it was not subtle. Puffs of steam came from their joints as they marched, a hazy cloud surrounding the metal warriors. The Mineralite warriors fought with renewed vigor, and a few Animalians broke off into the forest. Luke could almost make out the mouth of the tunnel they had come by. They're digging through the dirt to get past our front line, hollowing out our kingdom from inside where we are weaker. The metal man caused chaos among the ranks of the Animalians. Those that did not move out of their way in time suffered the consequences. Stop! Lord Edmund's breathless voice shouted from the stairwell behind him. Luke froze on the spot. His voice was one Luke had learned to both fear and respect. Stop what? Tell the men to stop fighting! The poor portly fellow mopped his brow with a greasy handkerchief and scowled at his commander. What does my lord know that I do not? It doesn't matter. Hold your fire! Luke trusted his lord with his life and the life of his men. Retreat and wait for orders! The Animalians roared in triumph. The resulting confusion allowed them to overtake those who were outside the castle. My lord, you must tell me what we can do to defeat them. You can't just let them die out there. Luke begged his lord to allow him to fight. But Lord Edmund only frowned as more and more Animalians poured into the castle. We had a deal. The Cat Mask leader snarled from the courtyard below. You failed to uphold your end of its bargain. Luke was gobsmacked. His vision blurred as his knees buckled. A man of his own blood had betrayed him. My own cousin, how could he? How could he throw away everything and give in to these monsters? You could hardly have expected me to have informed my men I decided to join with forces with the animals they've been trained to kill. Lord Edmund laughed at the preposterous idea. The ears of the king would have heard this, and I would have been killed. Luke leaned against the stone edge of the battlements. Years of training was the only thing holding any of the soldiers back from killing Lord Edmund on the spot. One of Luke's soldiers did not feel so inclined and pointed his musket at Lord Edmund's head. Almost instantly they found their end at the hands of the metal claws of the Animalians. Most of his men were going to die at their hands. The Animalian leader and his consort climbed the wooden ladder which led to the battlements. His golden eyes held a hard edge, and his face curled into a wicked smile. Do you know why you are valuable to us? The Cat Mask leader asked. Luke imagined Edmund could smell the leader's foul breath. Lord Edmund opened and closed his mouth, but wisely decided to keep it shut. The woman drew a metal claw finger across Edmund's jaw. It drew the smallest droplet of blood. Your family's highborn blood is irrelevant to us. We own your money, your lands. The only thing that made you valuable to us was your control over your men. I lost an entire troop of my men when I was supposed to be welcomed with open arms. You are worthless to me. The consort raised a clawed hand, and Lurk turned away. Thud. Edmund's body hit the ground. Luke's black power stone grew hot against his chest. His blood boiled. Traitor or not, Lord Edmund was family. His soldiers had entrusted him with their lives. He could kill a fistful of Animalians given the chance. His feet lifted off the ground a few inches at the thought. The Cat Mask leader strode over and pulled Luke back to the ground. You've already lost. He held Luke's chin in his hand and he growled, Your blood belongs to Animalia now. He twisted Luke's face to force him to look at the corpse of his cousin. This is what happens to those who defy the wishes of the Emperor. The leader shoved Luke away and looked at the Mineralites. Which of you will take your master's place? A moment of chilled silence passed. Luke smiled. He knew his men. They would never rise to such a taunt. I will serve as the master of these men in the stead of Lord Edmund. No, not him, anyone but him. Luke wished he had been slain, that he had been thrown off the battlements. Any fate would have been better than this. The knowledge that his own son was a traitor. He knew what he had to do, but it didn't make it any easier. He was a soldier, a loyal soldier of the king, and these were traitors. Luke dragged himself to the edge of the castle wall and jumped off. His black power stone cast an ultraviolet glow about his body. For just a moment, Luke paused in midair. Commander Luke alighted upon the dormant but still running machines. He ripped out the cables which connected them to the control towers and pried away the recently added modifications. Shouts and screams were heard from the Mineralites begging their commander to stop. The Animalians looked confused, but they wouldn't look like much of anything pretty soon. The machines groaned and the sound of gears were working overtime and the ticking of their internal clocks grew louder. Dawning horror alighted upon the Animalian leader's face, and he shoved his men out of the way, running for the airship. Untethered from their control towers, the machines shook Luke loose. They destroyed everything in their wake without prejudice. Luke launched himself into the air and soared past the battlements. He did not have to wait long before the winged men descended after him. Captain Pascal unmoored the Kensington, and Luke dived through the open bay doors just before they closed. Gotta get a bit close, aren't we? Pascal flipped the switch for the lights and transferred all power to the engines. For a brief moment, the only light that could be seen below was that of the eyes of the metal men, and just as quick, the scene was gone. We must warn the king about the Animalian tunnels and the traitors. Luke winced. We cannot stop at one of the other castles. He is the only one we can trust. And just as he said it, he began to doubt the validity of that statement. The training which had told him right from wrong and who to trust was falling apart at the seams. Sometime later, the king's assistant sat prim and proper behind a desk with a guard to each side. He'd never seen a day's battle. If the new trusted a soft man like this, he may have little use to Luke against the Animalians. Captain Pascal had anchored the Kensington at the mooring tower outside the royal halls, ready to at a moment's notice. I see the king. The words spoken by a voice Luke could hardly recognize. Was it the grief, the exhaustion, something else entirely? The king's assistant didn't look up. The king is currently in mediations. Do you wish to make an appointment? Then show me where the king is. I must speak to him. No one may interrupt in mediations. I bring grave news of the most importance. Luke slammed his fist on the assistant's desk. The assistant looked up and gasped. Gods! The guard leapt to obey the man's order. Luke unsheathed his sword and hefted his shield off his back. Fresh and out of practice, there were no match for him. Luke pointed his sword at the assistant. Now take me to the king. The assistant hard before him, leading him down the hall. Winding corridors filled with scenes of peace were horribly distorted. Luke's war able to burn to battles and death. The king led him out of the ambassadorial halls. What is the meaning of this? Luke leveled his sword at the assistant's neck. The king's in the meeting. His hands shook as he pointed to the building near. You should not interrupt them. This alliance is more important than any news I have. You should know to keep your mouth shut. Luke sneered, gesturing for them to continue walking. The doors to the meeting hall were blocked by elementary guards. Luke allowed the assistant to flee. The guards must have seen and threatened him, so there was no point pretending. Luke sheathed his sword and put his shield on the ground. I come from the new Mineralite front line with grave news. King must receive. Aside, so I may deliver my message. You assassins are getting more and more old, aren't you? The Mineralite gesture for the Elementi stand. This one's mine. Luke unsheathed his sword, kicked his shield, and caught it. I do not wish to fight you, but if that is the price of entry, so be it. The doors were slammed open by the waiters who were supposed to keep them shut. Everyone turned to look at Luke as he ran into the meeting hall. What is the meaning of this? King Dresden stood from his seat. A series of clicks sounded as the King's Guard disabled the safety on their muskets and took aim at their Mineralites activated their power stone, the element glowed with little dust. Luke released his grip on his sword and shield, letting both fall. He sank to his knees in supplication. The king, Lord Edmund, Duke of Veersey, has betrayed us and sided with the Animalians. All his troops at the capital castle are now under control of a terrible, cat-masked man. I believe the whole province will fall without further reinforcements. Gasps and shouts created a cacophony of sound as the Mineralite nobles and commoners from the Veersey province panicked. Even the Elementi were affected by this reveling. Silence! The king shouted in, and the voice quieted. The king's tightly clenched on the hilt of his sword, and his mouth was taut. How did you get away? And the Kensington with Captain Pascal, the middleman on the troops, the Animalians, to cover my escape. I had to come to warn you. The Animalians have dug tunnels to bypass the front lines and attack us from the inside. The voices rose again. The Taj and the Lord Ambassador tried to regain control of the room, to no avail. Have we heard from the Baller Republic? The Baller Elementi Highborn asked. Has the Baller Republic been attacked? Another Highborn shouted. All messages were suspended during the meeting, Assistant called out. I will seek an update immediately. Let the soldier speak, Hector Pavia commanded, and the voices lowered enough to allow the king to ask a question. Did you see to it that the traitor died before you left? Lord Edmund was executed by the Animalians. Luke bowed his head in shame. I am sickened to admit one of my own sons took his place as commander of the troops. Luke's mouth was dry, his vision hazy. He could see now this king was not soft. There remained yet to seen if he would be merciful. If your Majesty finds it right to kill me as my blood is shared with the traitor, the Creator will find no fault in your actions. Oh, Ishi, have mercy on your soul. The Elementi Taj breathed. You share blood with the traitor. The king drew nearer. Yes, Luke flinched when King Dresden touched his shoulder. Then it is up to you to bring your honor to your family by becoming my advisor. The king touched his sword to each of Luke's shoulders. Rise, loyal knight of the king's order. Luke staggered to his feet and could not bring himself to look at the king in his eyes. He refused to let the king see him weep. You will never forget this, my king. See to it I do not. King Dresden gestured for his attendants to find him a seat. The story continues in Chapter 19, A Question of Loyalty. As tension rises, unexpected proposals are made, and the fate of the Baller Republic hangs in the balance. Intense debates, deep-seated grievances, and a call for unity. Catch us next week as we're going to be sharing Chapter 19.